Good evening, everybody. Good evening and welcome. This was kind of a surprise event with very, very little planning. Finale kind of closing down and switching over to Dorico was not something, obviously, we were expecting. I had about a dozen people ask me to do a little overview, so that's kind of what we're doing tonight. And this isn't going to be like any long-winded presentation. We're not going super into depth with any one or any like overall facet of Dorico. This is more just a general overview of my experience with Dorico and just the things that I like about it. But like I said, this was kind of a surprise, so there's not a whole lot of structure. It's going to be kind of free-flowing tonight. It's even like in the middle of I'm rebuilding my website and changing over all of my live streaming stuff, so this was literally just a real quick setup and get stuff running. But if you are able to catch it live, that's awesome. Go ahead and drop a question in the chat. If you're not here live, you can always come back after the fact. I'm going to have some links in the description for a Discord server for the studio, and there's also the website link and all of that stuff there for when that is up and running. But my name is Cody Ortz. I am the owner of Silverling Virtual Studio, and I'm a composer and an engraver, and I do a lot of music preparation in the studio, and almost all of my projects use Dorico. I switched from Finale back in 2017, so this is kind of a fun topic for me to talk about. I've been telling people since I switched to Finale that they should be switching to Dorico, and now I guess, you know, with Finale basically dying, you don't have a choice. So come jump in, it's great. But anyway, so like I said, we're not going to get super long-winded tonight. It's going to be relatively fast-paced, kind of free-form, like I said, nothing super in-depth. If you have any specific questions or want to see anything in detail, just shoot me a message on Discord or shoot me an email or anything like that. But let's jump into Dorico a little bit. We're going to start just kind of taking a look at some projects that I've done. I don't know if I'm better up in the bubble or if I'm better out of the screen, but take a look at a couple projects I did. This one is from a couple of years ago. This is a choir piece. It's very, very minimal in terms of edits and stuff that I needed to do on the page. And you can kind of see just everything is very clean in Dorico. It's one of the primary characteristics about the program that I enjoy is that everything is very spaced out. It's very consistent from page to page as far as the top and bottom staff alignment. It's really nice text and all of that stuff. And you can see if I pop over to the Engrave tab, I didn't really do a whole lot of editing on this. So this is kind of what Dorico looks like, just straight out of the box, no tweaking, nothing like that. It's very clean, it's very efficient, it's very accurate, and it's so nice to use. It's very reliable and gives you really solid results every single project. So it's fantastic, highly recommend it. We can take a look at a couple different things. Like let's take a look at, let me see if I can pull it up. Part condensing in the scores. So I do a lot of ensemble writing and I do a lot of part preparation for film scores and for orchestras and stuff. And a lot of what I need to do requires condensing. Now in Sibelius and in Finale, we have to condense parts manually, which is a giant pain in the butt. But if you can see here, we have like a clarinet part. These are on the same staff. And if I disable condensing real quick for you to see, this is what they'll end up seeing on the parts. So the parts are completely separate, but on the score, all we have to do is enable condensing, and it will take similar parts, and you define like what parts share staves and all that stuff, but it combines those. Super, super easy to get scores out. In Sibelius, I know you have to do like individual an individual staff per instrument, and you have to do kind of like a dummy condensed version, but then you have all of these issues between linking the parts, and if you make edits after the fact, you have to remember to go edit them on all the different staffs and all that. So it's very easy to use, and it makes life so much easier with parts and all that stuff. It adds in your A2s, it adds in your unisons and divises and all that stuff without you having to go through and edit manually, which is a really nice feature. So part condensing in the score, definitely something that I like about that. Something else that's really good is, again, in parts here, is doing different transpositions for different like wind instruments. So a lot of my clients are they're in countries outside the US, so some of them have different transposition needs, or if I'm writing a piece that is both for band and for orchestra, a lot of times I'll need to do a trumpet piece in B flat and the same trumpet part in C and go back and forth. So this is an example where I had to do that. I took the composer's name off and all that stuff, but this is a piece that I had to do that for this year. We needed the same trumpet part both in C, or in Do, and then in B flat, which is what we have here. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. It's super easy, but what's nice about this is that the parts are linked. So if I make a change in one of them, it changes in the other part. So again, this goes back to what I like about things kind of being smart and linked, is that you don't have to like make a checklist in your brain and go check, did I make that edit in every single instance, in every single step. So that's very helpful, the parts being linked there. How you do that is in setup mode. It's over here in layouts. Usually I'll just duplicate a layout. So we'll grab this and just duplicate the layout. And then down at the bottom, when it makes that, we're going to do a transposition override. And then we're going to set the transposition to B flat. And now I have a B flat trumpet part. And change the label. And we'll talk about all this other fancy stuff that I'm doing here. But so now I have a trumpet 2 in B flat. And again, parts are linked, so everything is connected there. So that's another really great feature if you're doing part preparation, or if you are doing, let's say you're writing a band piece and you only have a bass clef euphonium part, but you need to put it in treble clef. You can do both of those linked parts and all that stuff. So very, very helpful right there. And let's see, what else? We can talk about percussion maps real quick if I can find. I think it's this file. So this is, again, a score that I did earlier this year. Yeah, percussion maps. So one of the needs for this one, it was a giant percussion section with lots of instrument changes and all that kind of stuff. Rather than writing it on a grid, it was a lot easier to write it on a 5-line staff, but that means we need a percussion map. So it's really easy to create that in Dorico. You make it its own flow, and then you just add your labels and everything there. And you can go back and change. You can change note heads to different things. Like if my wood block, for whatever reason, needs to be a diamond, I don't know, we'll just go with that. You can change note heads really easily there and all that stuff. So percussion maps become very, very, very simple to do in this, and that's one of the other things that I like. There's a lot of stuff that I like about Dorico, but like I said, that's just kind of a highlight of the things that that are really nice with me, with the work that I do, both in composition and with part preparation for composers in and outside the country. So there's all that stuff. Like I said, if you have any questions, or you want to see anything more in depth, go ahead and pop a question in the chat there, and I will get to it there at the end. But just kind of blazing along here, I wanted to go through, and I've had, probably this is what more people have asked me about than anything else, is just starting a project. How do you go and just get started with stuff? So we're going to go ahead and do that. You can start from templates. So like there are a bunch of band templates and a bunch of chamber ensemble templates, orchestral jazz, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to start one from scratch here. And this is the dialogue that pops up here. So we're going to, I don't know, we can add, let's do just some random stuff. Let's do a flute to start with. And we're going to do, I don't know, let's do a harp. Maybe. And let's do a string section. So down here on the left, you have individual players. You have section players for like your violin section and things that you might have divisis on and all of that. And then we can also add ensembles in. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to choose a string section. We're going to go with this one. These are the instruments that are included. I don't want to have a bass, so I'm going to click the one that doesn't have a bass, and we're going to add that section in. So that's how we kind of get started on the project, and then this is your blank template. This is probably a good place to point out the layout of Dorico. Up at the top over here, we have setup, write, engrave, play, and print. So these are your tabs, and each tab has a different purpose. It has a different job to do. Your setup is obviously where you're setting up the project. You are picking what instruments are there. You're picking what players may be double on instruments. You're picking, is it a solo or is it a section? You are picking what your layouts are. You're picking how many movements there are to the piece. And you're also picking what players play in what movements, what players are assigned to what layouts, and all of that stuff. So that's kind of all just like the administrative aspect of the piece. No musical, no graphic information. It's just connecting things and making connections where they need to go. Over in write mode, this is obviously where we're going to write the piece of music. This is where you're going to input your notes. This is where you are going to do your dynamics and your articulations. This is where you're going to do your meter changes and all of that stuff. So this is where you are inputting everything. One thing that you will notice in here that is different from especially Sibelius is if I grab something and drag the mouse, I'm not rearranging the layout. I'm not accidentally dragging stuff around the screen because that's not the job of write mode. And that's probably my favorite thing about Dorico, having to switch back into Sibelius occasionally for engraving projects. Dorico, you don't accidentally do something and be unaware of it. So you don't accidentally move a line or a note or an articulation or a dynamic or something off the side of the page and you don't realize it because you're just kind of clicking around on the screen focused on other things. With Dorico, each tab has its own very specific job, and you can't do the job of another tab like I can't engrave while I'm in write mode. So very helpful. Just a very brief overview. The engrave mode is where we're actually changing the position of things on the page. So I can adjust the layout a little bit, like the graphic layout, move some spacing, adjust the musical spacing, adjust the spacing between the staves, the spacing between objects and the staff, and all of that stuff. But I will not ever adjust what the music actually is here, which is really, really nice because, again, when you're adjusting the layout, you don't accidentally want to move a note or get rid of an articulation or drag something onto the wrong staff or something. So you're not going to accidentally write music in the engrave mode, and you're not accidentally going to engrave something in the write mode, which is great. Play mode is kind of under the hood with the MIDI data. It has a little bit of functionality like a DAW, so I'm not going to get into that because that's its own can of worms and will confuse a lot of people switching into it. For now, for most of you, you don't need to use the play tab. Don't worry about it. And then your print tab is obviously, where you're printing stuff. You can do paper graphics. You can watermark things, which is really helpful. So let's say I'm sending this out and this is just a demo, right? And I don't actually want people to publish this. You can watermark it and you can do all that stuff. If you're doing different versions, you can add a date and time stamp down at the bottom. So very helpful, especially if you're collaborating with other people and you want to kind of keep things organized in-house. So edits and stuff are useful. So those are all the different tabs that we have, and I will pop over into write mode. And now let's talk about actually getting started writing music in here. The first thing that I will say is, this is not Finale. This is not Sibelius. Don't try to use Dorico like you would those notation programs. Dorico is very heavily, there's a heavy emphasis on keyboard input, not mouse clicks. So if you are trying to mouse click things into Dorico, you're gonna have a miserable time. Take 25 minutes and learn a couple hotkeys and keyboard shortcuts and you'll be fine. So probably the biggest thing to learn is the idea of popovers. So I need to start this piece. I need a time signature to start this piece. So normally I would go, okay, let's go over to the time signature tab, and what time signature do I want? And I'll click that, and then I'll drag it in. And you can do that, but it's cumbersome and it takes time, and we don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to click in the music where I want to write something, and then I'm going to use a popover. So a popover is I hit shift and then the letter of the thing that I'm trying to input. So right now I'm trying to input a meter. Meter starts with the letter M, so I'm going to put in shift M, and you get a popover here. And in the popover, I just type whatever time signature I want. So let's say I'm going to do 4/4, we'll keep it easy, and there it goes. So I don't have to look for things in a menu. Shift M for meter, type in 4/4 or 3/4 or whatever you want. We'll get into meters here in a second, and that's it. Now if I want to add a couple bars in here, I'll go to the end. Bars starts with B, so we're going shift B. How many bars do I want to add? I don't know, let's do 15, and we can make it a 16 bar piece. There it is. Just type in how many bars I want, and there you go. Same thing if I want to do bar lines, like let's say for whatever reason I want this to be a double bar, shift B for bars. I want a double bar line, there you go. Super easy, no menus, no anything like that. It's all right there at your fingertips. You don't have to look for stuff if you just know a handful of shortcut keys, which is really helpful. And it's very intuitive. M for meter, B for bars. We want to do a tempo. Tempo starts with T, so shift T. Let's call this Allegro. And there you go. That's all it is. Let's do a key signature. Key starts with K, so we'll do a key signature. And there's a number of ways I can put keys in. If I want to do, say, G major, just a capital G is fine. If I want it to be G minor, lowercase g. Or if I don't know the theory and I don't know what the key is, but I know there's 3 flats in the key that I want to put in, 3F, 3 flats, and there you go. So a number of different ways to put in the key, but it's just a popover. Shift K for key, and there you go. So super helpful information with popovers. Please, please, please don't mouse click everything in Dorico. Just use the keyboard. So after we do keys, the key, let's talk about just some basic note input. Dorico uses rhythm before the note, so duration before pitch, which I think is helpful. So if I'm putting in quarter notes, that's number pad 6, and then you can just type in whatever note you want. So we'll go in there. You can use a MIDI keyboard, or I can use the actual keyboard here if I want a G there, shifting pitches around and all that stuff. You can look all those little hotkeys up. I don't need to explain all of those, but a couple different ways we can put that in. Changing our rhythms here uses the number pad. 5 is your 8th note, 6 is your quarter note, 7 is your half note, and all that stuff. It's laid out on this side of the screen. You can see pretty clearly. But it's very logical once you get a hang of that. So I'm just going to put in a couple of different notes there just to move along and give us some accidentals and stuff to play with. So that's your note input. If you are like super, super hard set on putting your pitch in and then selecting what your rhythm is, you can do that. That's over here. Hit K and it'll switch that. So you hit the note and then you hit the rhythm you want. I'm pretty sure that's how Finale does it. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that's the way Finale does it still. But I prefer this way. I think it's a lot faster just because of how music is written. Generally, you're going to be using pretty consistent rhythms more than you are consistent notes. So just a thought there. But anyway, moving along. That's our note input. And so let's talk about dynamics. Dynamics are a giant pain in the butt in just about every notation system, in every notation software, because it's all like individual things and it doesn't actually connect to the music. It connects to the staff, and it's a pain in the butt. So let's use a popover first. So popovers for dynamics. Dynamic starts with a D. So I'm doing shift D, and then I'm just typing in the dynamic that I want. So let's say I want mezzo forte, MF. There you go. Pops up. It's a dynamic, and it is attached to the music. It's attached to the note, which is great. And let's say I want to have a crescendo in here. So I want to do a crescendo from this note all the way to this one. Well, normally how we used to do that is we would go over and find the dynamic, and we would hit this, and then we'd drag it out, and we'd make it as long as we want, and then it was great. But that's a giant waste of time. Instead, what I want to do is not save this. Instead, what I want is I want this whole measure to crescendo, and I want it to end at a forte. So we're going to crescendo, Shift D for dynamic. We're going to crescendo up to a forte, and there it is. And it's all linked, which is fantastic. It makes life so much easier. Let's say I wanted this to start subito piano, and then I wanted it to crescendo up to forte. I don't know if it'll work with spaces. Yeah, there we go. You just type it in, and that's what you get. So popovers, you don't have to look for things with menus. Please don't mouse click stuff into the score, and you'll have a great time. So that's how dynamics work. They're all linked and all of that stuff. You can go in and unlink them just with right clicking, and you can ungroup and unlink, but we don't need to do that. That's kind of what it is. One thing I did want to mention here is group input. So let's say in my violin, viola, cello part, I am doing this. Something like this. I don't know, let's make it all fancy and whatnot. All right, so we have a little bit of a different part there. I can group dynamics, again, just with one popover. Select all the instruments that I want, hit Shift D, and we're gonna make that forte. Now, all of the instruments are now the same level. But let's say I change my mind, and I'm like, you know what? I want these to be mezzo forte. They're all linked, so I don't have to change every single one because they're like musically linked. All I have to do is change one, and it changes all of them, which is super, super helpful. So anyway, that's just a very basic dynamic input overview. There are definitely more things that we can go in depth with, but that's super helpful with that. Let's do tuplets. Tuplets are fun. So normally in Sibelius, you have a couple hotkeys. I think it's Control 3 or Command 3 to make triplets and do all of that stuff. But you're kind of limited on what you're able to do. In Dorico, the tuplets are one key, and just like a popover, it's the semicolon button. Hit the semicolon button, and you type in the ratio that you want. So right here, this would be 3/8 notes in the space of 2. You hit enter, and there it is. Or let's say I wanted super weird. Let's say I wanted 4 in the space of 3. That's not an easy option on Sibelius. That is or finale. That is something that you have to go like into the weeds, into the bowels of the machine to do. And here it's super easy. Let's say I wanted 5 in the space of 3 of them. It's any ratio you want, and Dorico just does the calculations, makes it happen, and there you go. So you just type in what you want using a popover. Love, love, love the tuplets. I'm gonna do one more. I don't know, let's do 2 in the space. Whoop, 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 whoop. 2 in the space of 3, I guess, I don't know. There we go. So all kinds of different tuplets that we can do, which is super, super fantastic. All right, let's talk about text a little bit. So text input, I'm gonna hide this. We'll talk about that in a second. It's Alt-T to hide that. But anyway, text. Text sounds like the letter X, so we're gonna do Shift X to get a text popover, and it works pretty normally. It's just a text editor, okay? But we can go through, and I can edit right here at the text. I can do it in different styles. I have different formatting things that I can do, different paragraph styles that I can choose from, and all of that stuff. There's default text and all of that. All of your normal bold, italics, underline, all of that stuff works as normal in Dorico. So like Command B or Control B makes it bold, all that kind of stuff. Size adjustments, width adjustments, all of that. Superscript, subscript, it is all right here. There's no menus, there's no ribbons up at the top of the screen. It's all kind of hands-on right there, which is super helpful. The other thing that is very helpful is you can insert music text and musical symbols just by right-clicking. So I don't think my little text popover shows. Right-click, insert music text, and I can insert musical symbols. So you can insert pretty much anything. It's all the musical symbols, but we'll go with, I don't know, we'll do just like a flat, right? So we can insert all of that stuff for whatever reason. You want to leave a note, or you want to leave maybe a composer's, like a performance note or something like that for the performer to, or a reminder or whatever. You can do that pretty easily there. The other thing that we can do is we can use tokens. So tokens are this kind of format. Okay, so we have our open and closed brackets on the end. We have the @ symbol. Is there a word for that? The @ symbol. And then in the middle, what is the thing that we're referencing? Okay, so all of this information is pulled from your project information, which is, again, Control I for information, and it pulls it up. And this is where we have kind of all of the metadata, I guess, of the piece. So this would be the title. Let's call it, no, I was going to call it Death of Finale. Let's not do that. Let's call it Dorico for Beginners. All right. We apply that, close it, and now it changes, right? So that's what your tokens are, referring to different things. But how we can change that is just highlight it, right-click, and you have all of the tokens right here. So your project info, title, subtitle, dedication, composer, all of that stuff, flow info, all of that, current date, all of that, musical symbols for all of that stuff, music text, all kinds of stuff. So that's super helpful with tokens in order to be able to kind of control your data. And that information, one thing I wanted to show you, is very helpful when we are doing templates. So this is my wind ensemble template, and down here at the bottom, I have the ASCAP registration number, I have my copyright information, and I have the publication number and the part number and all that stuff. And rather than me going in on every single document and changing that, I have it saved as a template, and all I do is come up here in the project information, and when I publish a new piece, I just pop the new publisher ID in there. And when I update the work number, that's all I have to do there. And it has all the information ready to go. So that's what kind of tokens are for, and it also helps you kind of keep track of things between parts and with part layouts and all that stuff, but we'll get there here in a second. So that is text and tokens. Let's go back here and let's do some like more advanced nonsense. So with meter input, we can do your basic like 4/4, you can do, I don't know, 3/16, right? But we can get really, really kind of weird stuff going on. Like, I don't know, let's say I want it to be 1732. It'll put it in there, it'll do it. And even if you want to get non-dyadic time signatures, is that what they're called? Time signatures that don't divide into two. So for instance, let's say I want 5/3. It'll do it. All of that weird stuff, it'll do it, it'll calculate it, and you just put it in. So again, no menus, there's nothing going into the back end. You don't go into the bowels of the software to get this stuff done. No matter how complex it is, it's just a mouse, or it's just a keyboard stroke away. So very, very useful tools here. Anything from 4/4 to, I don't know, I don't want to like break it, but we'll do like let's do a 12/8, I don't know. Ooh, no, let's do this. Let's do a 5/8. Let's do a 5/8. So 5/8 is usually grouped in groups of 2 and 3. So if I put in eighth notes, it is going to group it a group of 3 and a group of 2. Well, let's say I don't like that. I don't want it to do that. I want it to be a group of 2 and then a group of 3. Two things I can do. One, I think it's brackets. I don't usually do this a whole lot, but you put the 2 and the 3 in brackets, and then it will beam it appropriately into groups of 2 and 3. So again, rather than me going in and manually adjusting the stems and the beaming of every single eighth note group, you just do it with a keyboard, right? Or if I want to do goofy stuff and do additive time signatures, I could do a 2 plus 3 at the top, even though that's just 5/8. We won't tell, that's the secret, right? But we can do all of that stuff. We can do alternating time signatures. We can do concurrent time signatures of different things. So let's say I want one group to be in 6/8, but I want another group to be in 3/4, like the end of the of Holst's second suite, that kind of deal. If we want that thing happening, we can do that. So that's kind of your more advanced meter and all of that stuff. I am going to go back to just regular old 5/8, and then you know what? Let's do this. In this one, I want this to be my 2/3. So let's say I want the beaming to change. This will kind of take us into our next thing. I could do that, but now you see the problem is I have 2 time signatures. So what I do is I click on this 5/8 and I open the properties panel down at the bottom, which is Control 8. And this is where we have all of kind of like the hidden features of each one of the things that we've input. Literally anything on the page has properties to it that Dorico figures out automatically, but if I don't like it, I can always go in and change it. So I have this time signature here. I don't need it, I can hide it. It's still here, as you can see with the little signpost here, but it's not shown because the property is hidden. So that's another useful feature with all of that stuff. I think this was the engraving options kind of thing in Sibelius, and Finale has its own plethora of submenus and stuff, but that's all down here. It's whenever you click on something, it opens it up, which is very helpful. And a couple different things we can do down in the properties panel, like let's say I want a cautionary accidental on this A flat because, I don't know, it's a violin part and violins don't like playing flats. If I want to do a cautionary accidental, that's down here in the properties panel. So normally it's hidden, or I can show it, or I can put it in brackets and all that stuff. Since it's a cautionary accidental, I can do all of that stuff. The nice thing too is, let's go ahead and get rid of that. If you'll see this section right here, I'm changing the properties locally, which means just on this piece of paper, just on this part, or globally, which means on the part, all of the parts linked to it, including the score, I'm changing this property. So this is really helpful when maybe in a score, the conductor doesn't need a cautionary accidental, but the player does need a cautionary accidental. That would be something where we would adjust it on the part locally so it doesn't show up in the score. But if we're doing something, trying to think of an example where you need to do it globally. I don't know, harmonics or that kind of stuff. Showing the harmonics and the type of harmonic that it is. That's something you would want to do globally because that's something both the conductor and the player need to kind of know about. So that's that in the properties panel, and that's more or less the entire idea of the right panel. Just with that information, you can get done like 90% of what you need to get done in Dorico for most of your projects. Whether you are a composer or a teacher or an engraver, we're going to get to engraving here in just a hot second, but that's like 90% of writing and getting started with Dorico. Learn your popovers, learn the properties panel, and that's it. And whatever you want to do, you just type it in the popover and you are good to go. So there's that. Let's pop over real quick to the engraving tab here. Now, like I said in the engraving tab, I cannot edit the music as far as like what the notes are and the rhythms and all that stuff. So if I grab a note and I start trying to drag it around, it's not going anywhere. It is right there. Nothing gets changed. I'm holding down the mouse and moving it. Nothing's happening. Like in Sibelius or in Finale sometimes when you grab something trying to click something else and then you drag it off to the side and things get tweaked around. We don't have that problem here. Instead, what we can do is we can grab the individual music items and let's say, okay, these all need to be lined up and they're not quite lined up. These talking about the dynamics. Well, let's grab this one and I'm going to slide it down so now it is in line with those. There you go. That's all it is. I can grab this and I can move it around. But notice the anchor, it's still tied to the music no matter where I put it, which means if I change it in the music, it will change regardless of where it is graphically, okay? And this is also down in the properties panel. Whenever I move something around, the properties panel adjusts down at the bottom. And if I just want to reset it, I just turn that off and it snaps right back to where it went. So very helpful there. We can adjust frames. So this is where we add extra frames of music in. Frames are essentially like containers for whatever it is you're trying to add in. So we have music frames, which is where we actually change the instruments and what the flows and all of that. We have text frames. So if I wanted to add a composer frame up here, I could do that. And it keeps that there, which is helpful. And then we can also do picture frame. So if you're adding graphics or you're adding whatever in graphically, you can do that. That is different than a graphic slice. A graphic slice is probably going to be helpful for teachers or for maybe you're in a master's and you're working on your thesis and you need excerpts from things. What you do is you grab the graphic slice, you create a slice, and then you just highlight the music that you want a picture of. And then you can export it either as a PDF, PNG, a vector file, or a TIFF file, a TIFF, right? So that's different than an image frame. An image, you're inserting an image. A slice, you are pulling the slice out. And the other thing is you can create a whole bunch of slices and then at the end export them all together or individually or whatever, which is helpful. Engrave is where we can also make adjustments to the staff height and all of that stuff. Let's see if it goes back up now. Sorry about that. My stream crashed. I think we're good. Yeah, there we go. Okay, fantastic. There's also like a 15-second delay, so sorry about that. Anyway, I'm just the OBS crashed, the streaming thing. Anyway, not important. So we are in the engrave mode, and the other thing that you can do is adjust things side to side. So let's say I don't like the spacing right here. I can make adjustments here, and that's just holding down Alt. I can also do Control-Alt to make larger ones or Shift-Alt to make like medium-sized ones. Again, to reset, you just hit backspace. But that's all the stuff that Engrave does. And that's pretty much all you use the Engrave panel for, is just minor graphical adjustments to make it look nice, to work on your page turns, to make sure there aren't collisions, even though you really won't have collisions with Dorico anyway. All that stuff is in the Engrave mode, and you're not going to ever accidentally adjust music or anything. So that's that. Just real quick, let me do just like a grab bag of different features and stuff that I like. The first thing is the jump bar. Now this is new, I think from Dorico 3 maybe it was introduced in 4, but if I don't know what I'm looking for, I can jump to it by hitting J. And this little jump bar pops up, just like a popover. It works exactly the same way. I want to type in what it is I'm looking for. So this little system break thing here, I don't want to look at that, okay? That is a signpost. So I'm going to type in hide signposts. Look, right there. Just type it in and hit enter, and it does it for you. Now, I know that's up here, right? But if I don't know where that is in a submenu or something, I just hit J, type in what I want, hide signposts, and it toggles it. And it also remembers the last thing that you searched. So if you want to toggle stuff on and off, very helpful. One thing that this is helpful in, like let's grab a harp part. I don't know. We're going to copy this into the harp part. We can do that. We can do copy and paste, or we can right click and paste special. We can duplicate it to the staff down there. Also super helpful. It'll show you your pedalings and all that stuff. But one thing that's really annoying in Finale and in Sibelius are the laissez vibratis, right? The let the percussion instrument ring, or sometimes the harp instrument and all that. let the note ring. Giant pain in the butt all the time because you hit slur and then you're sitting here and you're trying to engrave it and you're trying to drag it and make it like just the right thing, and they're never consistent and they never look right, and it's always just a giant pain in the butt. So instead, I hit J and I just start typing in laissez vibrati. And you hit enter, and there it is. And if I'm doing it a bunch of times, I can just hit J. Or, I think, we can just do it on multiple notes. And the reason why we can do it on multiple notes at a time, however many are selected, is because it's down here in the properties panel. If I turn that on, it's a property of each individual note. So I can turn it on and off there. But it's not a graphical element that I'm going to end up dragging around. It's just an automatic thing that that populates because it's a property of that note. It's not like an extra thing attached to it. It is part of the note. So super helpful there. Bar number changes. Let's say you're doing like a musical theater book. That was actually my first project in Dorico, was a 78-page musical book for Beauty and the Beast that I had to rewrite for one of my students with dyslexia. So I had to like color notes and make the fonts bigger and all of that stuff. But there are bar changes everywhere. There are different flows. There are repeats that go all over the place. And keeping track of all of that is insanely difficult. So rather than there being a bunch of different sub-menus to handle all that stuff, all I do is right-click on it. I go to bar numbers, and I'm adding a bar number change. Now, sometimes it's a vamp, right? And we just need to A, to B, to C, and then we are back into bar 3. It's as easy as that. It's just right-click, go to the property of that bar, and you are good to go. Or let's say you're doing a revival show and they have a giant cut, and for some reason they cut like 70 measures. Well, we can say, okay, now it's measure 74. Boom, there it is. And all of the subsequent numbers have updated based on that. So super easy to do bar number changes. Holds, let's talk about holds real quick. Let's make these eighth notes. Whoops, we're gonna make these eighth notes. Okay, so if I wanna do a hold starts with share my screen. I sure can, Daniel. I'm sorry about that. Thanks, Daniel, for running the stream. All right, so I don't know where we stopped. Screen share isn't it up? Thanks, Daniel. Sorry about that. What was the last thing, Dan, that we that you did see? Was it just all that stuff that came up since engrave mode? I think probably. So the jump bar is probably the big thing. So the jump bar is J, and that pulls that up, and that's how you type in what you're looking for, like hide your signposts, J, hide your signposts, all that stuff. So that's all there. What else did I talk about? Bar number changes, laissez vibratize, our properties down here at the bottom. So if I click on a note, it's laissez vibrati, vibrier. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's French. Don't do French. But we can do that with the jump bar as well. Very helpful when you're doing percussion. There we go. All right, we should be good now. Anyway, I'm also still here in my little circle. Anyway, so we have all those stuff, and then bar number changes, like what I input right there. It's just a right click, and then bar numbers, add bar number change. And you can do, this is how you change the actual number of the bar. Subordinate is how you go into like, this is 2A, this is 2B, this is 2C, and all that stuff. Or I don't want to include it at all, or I can go back to where it just was. So that's how we do bar number changes. Like I said, super helpful if you're doing something like musicals, where you're doing a book that has a bunch of cuts in it, or you're writing something that maybe the composer hand wrote it and inserted and took out a bunch of different music. So we have all that stuff. Holds are super important, and I love how Dorico handles holds. So if I'm inserting a hold starts with H. So using a popover, that is Shift H. Now, Shift H gets me the popover, and let's say I want a fermata. Notice how it handles it rhythmically. This fermata is actually on the and of 2, but it has gone through and appropriately assigned it to all the rhythmical values in the other instruments as well. Okay, so this is something that Finale, I don't think, has done. Maybe they implemented it recently, not since I've used Finale. Sibelius still doesn't do it, and it's so time-consuming to go through every time you have one and check and make sure that it's correct. And similarly, if I wanted to do a grand pause, it's H, and I just draw in the railroad tracks, and it inserts it at the appropriate rhythmical moment in each part. Very, very helpful, good feature right there. And yeah, it's great. Now, what else can we do? Again, grab bag just real quick. Filter selections, right-clicking on stuff, looking at all of these in the submenu. Let's say I only want to grab my dynamics. Okay, well, I can filter the dynamics. Or let's say I only want to grab, let's say I only want to grab flat notes or sharp notes or whatever. We can also filter by pitch, which is how we recolor notes for students with dyslexia and all that stuff. Very helpful filter feature there. Changing your divisi. So we have section, right? Did I make them section or individuals? Section, instruments, multiple people. So I can change the divisi. So let's say in this violin part, I actually wanted a solo violin and a section. Well, we just go down to the staff. I'm changing the divisi. I'm adding a solo player. And now I have a solo staff and a Glialtri staff. And then if it goes back, like let's say right here, in this staff, I want to go back to a unison and I want to put them all back together. Oh, staff, restore unison. It puts them back together. It adds a unison, but I still have everything separated up here. Very, very helpful. And if I want to make adjustments to that, the easiest way is to go into the signpost and hit enter. Let's say I want to do it this way. We'll do 1 and 2. It'll do it as violin 1, violin 2 divisi, and then down here on the bottom, it'll put them back in unison. So changing solos and all that stuff, so helpful. I know, especially in Sibelius, that's a giant pain in the butt because you have to do its own staff and then you have to hide it and then you have to bring it back and make sure it's not adjusting the layout down the road and all that stuff. And if you're halfway through a song and you're like, oh, now I want a violin solo, you have to go back and reset all the stuff, and it's a giant pain. So right here, it's a property of the staff system, and you insert it that way. Super helpful. Rhythmic changes. Let's say, for some reason, I want these to all be 16th notes, not 8th notes. I just highlight them and hit. No, that's not what I want. 16th notes. There we go. They're all 16th notes, right? But let's say that's not what I want. I want them as 16th notes, but I want them all pushed together. I can do that as well by making it an insert mode, right? I can do that. And these are all just basic inputs like we can Google, but it's just highlighting the notes that you want, and then you change the rhythm using the number pad to whatever rhythm you want it, 16th notes, 8th notes. If we write quarter notes, it'll overwrite, or if I hit I for insert, it'll push them, and I'll have that kind of rhythm there, which is helpful. So there's all that stuff. Rhythmic changes, super easy. Articulations, there are hotkeys for it, right? So that's our bracket. For accents and staccatos, we can change both of those. We can have portados, we can have marcatos, legatos, all that stuff. And you'll notice that's also over here. So again, I recommend just learn the hotkey for it. You'll be way faster with everything. But if you don't know what it is, they are over here on the left. So there's all that stuff. And watermarking I showed you in the print mode. So, yeah. So those are kind of, like I said, just rapid fire, very fluid, free-form overview of the features that I really like in Dorico and how I use it in most of my projects and everything. Again, just a couple tips as you're getting started here. This is not Finale. It's not Sibelius, so please don't try to use them like Finale and Sibelius. It is a keyboard-intensive program, so don't mouse click stuff in. Just learn the popovers. If I'm putting in a meter, it's Shift-M. If I'm putting in a tempo, it's Shift-T. If I'm putting in dynamics, it's Shift-D, all of that stuff. So very helpful. And if you don't know something, just look it up. And by look it up, I mean do two things. First, use the jump bar, J, and just look up what I'm doing. So if I want to change the font, I just type in font, and there it is. Font styles, music fonts. There's also paragraph styles for formatting and all that stuff. But if you don't know that, just Google it. Type in Dorico, change font, and it'll pop up. There are a ton of resources and all of that stuff. And that should all be helpful. We are closing in on an hour here. I don't think we're going to have any Q&As unless you have a question for me or anything. So I will cut it here. And like I said at the beginning, if you have any questions after the fact, there's going to be a link to the Discord server down in the description of the video. Feel free to pop on there. I'm trying to incorporate that into my business workflow a little bit. So if you are getting started and you have any specific questions, feel free to hop on there, ask a question, and I have it open pretty much all the time, so I'll hop on there and answer any questions that I can. But there are also all kinds of tutorials online. There are online resources. There's the Steinberg forum. There's also a Facebook group, although I tend to stay off the Facebook group now. It's changed a little bit. It's a lot more beginners asking very basic questions of things that you can Google, as opposed to this is a complex problem, how do I solve it? So I'm not on the Facebook group as much, but it's still helpful. Just please don't spam it for things that you can Google. But anyway, I'll cut it there for tonight. And yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, pop on that Discord channel or shoot me an email. Come check out the new website when it's up in a few weeks. And good luck getting started with Dorico. Feel free to reach out with any questions. So I will see you guys later.